Okay, so today we're going to do Revelation chapter 15, and just by way of a very quick review here of Revelation chapter 14, I just want to remind you that what we saw in that chapter was two different groups of people who were raptured into heaven or taken into heaven. We don't know if they're raptured or not. Rapture is kind of a technical term. It just means to be caught up or snatched up, and it's a quick and violent removal. And we know that the child here, who will be caught up to God into his throne, he'll be raptured. He's going to be taken violently by force. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's a secret. It just means it's the equivalent idea is that of a purse snatcher. When someone just comes up, runs up behind someone, grabs their purse, and off they go. We know that the 144,000 of Israel have been promised that they are going to be kept from the hour of trial. And remember, the hour of trial is this hour right here, when the harlot is destroyed in a single hour, on a single day, on a predetermined month and year. So these people are going to be kept from this hour of trial, and so they are going to actually be taken on the same day that the dragon is cast out of heaven. They're going to be brought into heaven just before the dragon is cast out. So they join the brethren, who are the child, the 24 elders, the fifth seal martyrs. We don't know they're fifth seal martyrs yet, but that's who they are. They're the martyrs of the harlot, because the beast doesn't begin to reign until here. And by the time Satan is cast out, there's already martyrs in heaven, and these are people who've been martyred since basically since the child was caught up to God into his throne. Okay, so we have the rapture, or the taking into heaven, of the 144,000, and then we also saw one more group of people who were taken. And that is this harvest right here, when Christ came on a cloud with a sickle, and he's instructed to harvest the earth. Okay, that is believers. He's going to take living believers into heaven. That's this last group. And notice, it's sometime after the beast begins to reign, but it will be before the second coming of Christ. So now we're in Revelation chapter 15, and basically Revelation 15 is connected right here to this harvest. What we're going to read in Revelation 15 is about this group of people who is in heaven. We're going to see them there, and it's a new group. It's not they're not the elders. They're not the 144,000. They're not martyrs. They're people who've just been removed alive from the earth just before God is going to begin to pour out his wrath. That is, in the bowls of wrath, which are going to be right in this section right here. All right, so Revelation 15, and I've entitled this, "The Door is Closed." And we're going to talk a little bit about doors and Christ's authority to open and shut doors of all kinds. And one of the doors that he can open, of course, is the door of heaven. And when Jesus says to in the letter to the church of Philadelphia, "See, I've set before you an open door." Okay, what I open, no man can close, and what I close, no man can open. He has the keys of David. Okay, so we're going to look at some of these open doors a little later on as we progress through this video. Revelation 15:1. "Then I saw another sign in heaven, great and amazing, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished." Okay, so this is the third sign that John saw in heaven. He sees 3 of them. This is the last one. The first one's recorded in Revelation 12, verses 1 and 2. That's the sign of the woman. A great sign appeared in heaven. Okay, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. Okay, that was the great sign that appeared in September of 2017. It's just an indication. It wasn't meant to indicate to us, hey, we're going to be raptured on this date or anything. It's just a heads up that the events that are in Revelation are about to begin, and that people should be watching for the second sign, which is the sign of the dragon, which includes this war in Israel, or the travail of the woman, the birth or identification of the sons of God, the child, this 7-day period before the child is caught up or presented to God on the 8th day. This second sign is in Revelation chapter 12, verses 3 through 6. And part of that second sign also includes the woman fleeing into the wilderness, okay? The woman flees into the wilderness, and we know that is going to happen on this same day. It's actually the same day as the abomination of desolation, but of course Revelation doesn't talk about that. So we just know from Matthew 24 that the woman is going to flee, or the remnant should flee into the wilderness when they see the man of sin standing in the temple of God. Okay, so we've got two signs. The first sign is the great sign of the woman. Then we have the sign of the dragon, which will include the rapture of the child. Hopefully that's you and me. The third sign, it will be witnessed by God's saints in heaven. This sign is in heaven. I saw another sign in heaven, great and amazing, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished. So these 7 angels in God's presence are the last sign. Only believers are going to see this sign, okay? Believers and angels and the living creatures, of course. But nobody on earth is going to see this sign. This is strictly for God's people in heaven. At this point in time, okay, we've got all kinds of believers in heaven, all kinds of raptured people and, resurrected martyrs, fifth seal martyrs resurrected. We've got all these people who are in heaven, and they are seeing these 7 angels, these 7 really beautiful angels coming out and being given the bowls of wrath. All of the signs are meant for believers. Now, there's this kind of popular theory out there, just because Paul said in one of his letters that the Jews seek signs and Greeks seek wisdom. But, we preach Christ crucified, that somehow or another, every time you see a sign, it's meant for Jews and it's a bad thing. That's not the case here at all. Signs are meant for whoever they're meant for, okay? And in this case, these signs are meant for believers. Jews don't care. They're not paying attention to any of this stuff. But those of us who read the book of Revelation, hopefully we're paying attention. And that as these signs occur, they are an indicator that we're moving closer and closer toward the culmination, which is the second coming of Christ and the millennial reign of Christ. The wrath of God is going to be finished once these 7 plagues are over. The wrath of God sort of already began when the harlot was destroyed. Okay, right here. God poured out the first portion of his wrath on the harlot, and he's going to finish it up down here when we read about the bowls of wrath. The 7th bowl is when he finishes up what he began with the harlot right here. But once these 7 bowls of wrath are poured out, then God's wrath is over. It's done. So in Revelation 15, verse 2, we're actually introduced to this particular group that's been harvested in Revelation 14:14 by one like a son of man who's seated on the cloud. Revelation 15:2 says this, "And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire, and also those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands." Okay, who are these people? Okay, they're a new group. They are singing their own song. They know they're not part of the 144,000 because the 144,000 were promised that they wouldn't have to endure past this time right here. And this particular group actually conquered the beast because they didn't take his number or the number of his name or worship his image. So what this means is that there are people whom the dragon is going to pursue, the woman's other offspring, okay, that are believers on this side during the reign of the beast, okay, and these believers, remember, we're encouraged not to take the mark, don't worship the image, don't worship the beast, don't take the number of his name. And those who persevered are taken on some day. We don't know when that day is. Okay, this is the day that comes like a thief in the night. This is the one that nobody knows when this one's going to be. We do know that when we're raptured, it's going to be on the 8th day after a war in Israel or an invasion of Israel is over, and we've been identified as sons of God. I am going to do a video, maybe 2 videos, on this 7-day identification of believers as the sons of God. It's worthy of its own whole little series, actually, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, so the people who are standing by the sea of glass, they're people who were believers, who were alive, taken alive into heaven, who didn't take the mark of the beast or participate in the beast's kingdom. This group is standing beside a sea of glass mingled with fire. The first time in Revelation that we actually see the sea of glass is in Revelation chapter 4, when we read about the 24 elders, and we haven't gotten there as far as this chapter by chapter study goes, but I'm just letting you know that that's where you first see the sea of glass. Revelation 4 verse 6, and before the throne, that is before God's throne, there is, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal. So crystal is transparent, and this sea of glass is like a giant window. That's how you need to think of it. It's a giant window right in front of God's throne. When you get to Revelation 15, now we see there's some fire mingled with that glass, that you can see fire being reflected in that window that's in front of God's throne. My understanding is that this is the window that people can view the lake of fire through. It's right in front of God's throne. And remember, in the last chapter, Revelation 14, this is what it says there. It says that people, the Lamb, and the holy angels are going to be able to watch the entities, whoever gets thrown into the lake of fire, they're going to be able to watch them for eternity. Okay, let's read that again. Revelation 14, verses 9 through 11. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day or night, these worshipers of the beast and its image, and so on. So it would appear that the holy angels and the Lamb are going to be able to observe this. They're going to be able to watch as people, the beast and the false prophet and anybody whose name isn't in the book of life of the Lamb is put into the lake of fire, and they're going to watch them burn for eternity. It sounds really awful, but let me tell you something. By the time the beast finishes up with his reign, everybody is going to be shouting how just it is that the beast and the false prophet and anyone who aligns themselves with those two entities deserves what they get. And it won't be entertainment to watch them, but it's going to be a part of the judicial satisfaction of God and Christ. So it would seem that at the time of these last 7 plagues that the fire has been lit. The lake of fire is open and it's ready for business. This group of believers around the sea sing the song of Moses and the Lamb, and they're accompanied by harps, okay? And we saw the 24 elders, or we will see on a later video, the 24 elders accompany themselves with harps. The 144,000 are accompanied with harps. And this last group here also has harps in their hands. This group, I believe, is just going to be solely invested in worship. They are not sons of God in the sense of being firstborn. They're the other offspring of the woman, but they are not firstborn. Okay, it's the firstborn who are going to rule and reign with Christ, and we know the 144,000 are also going to rule and reign with Christ because they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. If he goes to earth to rule, they'll follow him there. If he's in heaven with his Father or with other believers, they follow him there. They have access to heaven and earth and New Jerusalem and everything. This group here is going to be in God's presence up until after the millennium. They're not going to be rulers on the earth, so they are in God's presence. And they sang the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, "Great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord God the Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed." This is a song of God's worthiness, his holiness, his righteousness, and his supremacy over all kings and nations. Okay, verse 5. "And after this I looked, and the sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven was opened. And out of the sanctuary came 7 angels with 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, with golden sashes around their chests." And here's another way to say this one little phrase here. It says the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven, okay, or the sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven. This is a very interesting little phrase, and I want to break it down just a little bit here. The temple of the tabernacle of the testimony, that's a big mouthful there. What does it mean? In my mind, a temple was a permanent building and a tabernacle was like a tent. But actually, technically, that's not correct. The temple or the sanctuary is the inner shrine. It's basically where the Holy of Holies is. Okay, so this innermost shrine of where God's actual presence is. In the earthly temple, it was where the ark was. In the heavenly temple, it's where God's throne is. Okay, because God's throne is the same thing as the ark. Okay. And it's in this innermost shrine, this sanctuary of the tent of witness, that this is now opened and these angels come out. One of the things that this tells me is a couple of things. One, that God's throne room is, the sanctuary is where his presence is. It's where the ark is and all of that. But that the actual heavenly temple is more like a tabernacle. It's a temporary structure. A tabernacle is a tent. It's not meant to be permanent. And there is coming a day when the tabernacle of God will be with men. Okay, it'll be on the earth. It'll be in the New Jerusalem. So his dwelling place is no longer going to be in heaven. That is all going to be destroyed. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And God himself is not even going to have his throne room in the heavens, the new heavens. It's going to be in the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven onto the new earth. What we learn here when we see this word tabernacle is that what God is, the place where God is right now in heaven is temporary. It's going to be destroyed, and he's going to create a permanent dwelling place for himself, for believers, and we're going to be in the New Jerusalem with him. And then people who live on the new earth, okay, and those are not Christians, okay? Christians live in the New Jerusalem. The people who live on the new earth are other people. They're people who came out of the millennium or wherever, but they are going to be invited to the New Jerusalem. They'll have access to it, but it's not their technical home. There's another passage in Revelation 13:6, we already looked at this, that refers to heaven as being a tabernacle or a tent. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy. This is the beast from the sea. Blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And of course, those who dwell in heaven are all these people right here. That's who the beast is blaspheming when he rises from the sea of death. All right, verse 7 of Revelation 15. "And one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. And the sanctuary was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished." Okay, so one of the 4 living creatures is the one who is actually going to give these bowls of wrath to these 7 angels. You don't really ever see God the Father like doing anything. He gives the orders, and other beings, other entities carry out his will. And in this case, one of the living creatures is the one who will give the bowls of wrath to these 7 angels. And actually, they're very beautiful and glorious angels. And then this temple in heaven, this tabernacle in heaven, the inner sanctuary, says it fills with smoke from the glory of God. And here's a very interesting thing, that even though there are glorified people in heaven, believers who've been glorified, they're now in God's presence, that when God begins to manifest certain aspects of his nature, his glory, and his power, that he has to cover himself. He has to create a cloud and smoke. Otherwise, even people in heaven wouldn't be able to stand. And this reminds us of the day when God's presence filled Solomon's temple at its dedication. 2 Chronicles 7:1-3. And as soon as Solomon finished his prayer, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices. And the glory of the Lord filled the temple. And the priests could not enter the house of the Lord, because the glory of the Lord filled the Lord's house. And when all the people of Israel saw the fire come down and the glory of the Lord on the temple, they bowed down with their faces to the ground on the pavement and worshipped and gave thanks to the Lord, saying, "For he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever." And Revelation 15:8b, no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. It says here that no one could enter the sanctuary until these plagues were finished. Up until this point in time, the doors of heaven have been opened on numerous occasions, allowing Christ and angels and people to both enter and exit this heavenly sanctuary. And this is a big point that I want to make right here, okay? And that is that Christ is the one who holds the keys to everything. In Revelation, he holds all the keys, and he controls the access. When people and entities and groups of people are going into heaven and coming out of heaven, angels leaving, angels coming in, him leaving, believers being caught up, he is in control of all of these things. He is like Eliakim that we read about in Isaiah, the steward of God's house. The steward has all the keys. He controls everything. Christ is God's steward who controls everything. The doors of the heavenly temple had been opened to allow this group right here to come in. And now they're standing in front of the sea of glass. But once those 7 angels step out of that sanctuary, the door will be closed and nobody else is going to be admitted into heaven until the wrath of God is over. So when are the doors of heaven opened? Okay, this is just my understanding from when all the different times that I see Christ appearing in Revelation and, different groups of people showing up in heaven. I have at least 14 times here where heaven is opened, where the door of heaven is opened and someone is either coming or going, whether it's Christ or believers, angels. And in addition to controlling who can come into heaven and when they come in or when they can leave, Christ also controls the door to the pit, and he has the keys to death and Hades. So Christ is the one who determines who's going to die, when they're going to die, and where they're going to go. Okay, and nobody can die without Christ's permission. He has the keys to death. Nobody can die without Christ's permission. So I know that sounds really weird, but it's true. So when we have this 5 months, for example, right here, where the 5th trumpet is blown and an angel is thrown out of heaven, basically with the key to the pit and told to open the bottomless pit, and these entities come out, and Apollyon is going to come and indwell the dead man, the seventh king, who's the beast who rises from the sea of death. Okay, the sea in Revelation symbolizes one of two things. It's either the sea where there's water, or it's the place where dead people come from. But when these these angels that come out of this pit, these, I believe they're the watchers, when they come out and they torment people for 5 months, and they can't kill people, they don't kill them, but the torment is so bad that people will wish they could die, but they can't die. And you go, well, why can't they die? Jesus isn't letting them die. Okay, Jesus is not letting them die. And there's reasons for that we'll get into when we actually go to Revelation 9 and look at this a little more deeply. But Christ controls all of this. He controls when the beast dies, when the beast rises from the dead. Satan doesn't bring anybody from the dead. Jesus controls all of that. And he allows these things to happen when he chooses for them to happen. Christ holds the keys to death and Hades. He holds the keys to the pit. He's the one who controls when that pit is opened and when it's closed. Here, Revelation 1:18, I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and death. And we know that Christ also has the keys of David. These things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door that no one can shut. All right, so when it comes time for us to go to heaven, to be welcomed into God's presence, that door will be open and no one can shut it. Satan and his angels can't do a thing. Okay, they are impotent against the Lord Jesus Christ. And when it comes to who is rising from the dead and how they're rising and when and all that timing as far as the beast goes, all of that is under Christ's control. All of it. He is in control of all of this. And underneath his Father, of course, who has given him the authority to act on his behalf. So that's Revelation 15. It's pretty straightforward, nothing too technical there. And then Revelation 16 actually talks about the bowls of wrath, and they are all going to be poured out right here as far as the timeline goes. So let me know what you think about this. Leave a comment in the comments section. I hope you'll share this video series with someone else. Get a copy of the show notes. The link to that's in the description box below. Till the next video, I pray you'll have a very, very blessed day.